What happens when something you love turns into something you absolutely dread? And not because you don't like it anymore, but there's just a part of you that really can't do it right now. You wake up in the morning, remember it's scheduled, and every minute leading up to it carries with it a growing aversion. Your mind slowly escalating the rejection of your participation from a soft warning to a screaming siren in the moments just before. And at the same time, part of you still wants to do it. This isn't something you're completely over. This isn't something you don't care about. The solution to indifference is easy. You'd simply quit. But this is something else entirely. This is something you've always enjoyed, and you know you'll enjoy again, and you want nothing more than to enjoy it right now, but you simply can't. I'm KSR, and if any of that resonates or sounds familiar, you're probably experiencing burnout. And I know because I am. So let's talk about it. National awareness of burnout skyrocketed during the COVID-19 pandemic as a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and a loss of personal identity. But it can also apply to activities outside of work, and really anything in which you apply yourself, such as competitive video games. I, of course, mainly play Final Fantasy XIV, and chances are, if you're watching this video, you do too. But burnout can apply to any game or ongoing competitive activity. And before we get too into it, I want to make sure to point out that burnout is distinct from mental health conditions such as anxiety disorder or depression. The Mayo Clinic specifies that burnout is not a medical diagnosis, and while mental health conditions can be an influencing factor on burnout, if you are suffering from anxiety, depression, or in a crisis, here are some resources that can help, and I'll put the links to them down below. I've been there, and there's no reason for you to suffer alone. So what is burnout? Burnout's typically defined by three main factors: exhaustion, cynicism, and a lack of efficacy. If you are burnt out at work, you may lack the energy to be consistently productive, be irritable or overly critical of others, and be both disillusioned with your job and unable to appreciate your achievements. In Final Fantasy XIV, this translates to a lack of desire to do the activities you enjoy the most, such as raid, or fish, or farm mounts, or RP, and an increased irritation with the people you play with and or elements of the game itself. The disillusion with your work output is instead, in this case, disillusioned with your performance or time spent in the game, and you're unable to appreciate progging bosses at desired speeds or giving parses of sought after colors because neither seem tied to your performance as a player. What are signs of burnout? Maybe you've lost the joy in your primary activity in Final Fantasy, even though you desperately want to enjoy that activity again. Maybe you've started being overly critical of game design, blaming Party Finder or crit rates or outside influences when those excuses never used to factor into your conversations about the game. Maybe you're unable to celebrate your accomplishments in game or get sufficiently excited about the achievements that you used to aim for. You see, burnout isn't a feeling of nothing matters. It's the sense that things do matter, yet you specifically lack the efficacy to effectively influence the outcome or the energy to find satisfaction in your pursuits. You are exhausted by the effort you put in and worn down by the idea that your efforts are not reflected in your results. In the endgame raiding community, this is particularly prevalent. Within Savage tiers and ultimate fights, there are three main ways to experience the content at a high level: progression, parsing, and speeds. So let's look at the specific parts of each that can lead to burnout. Progression is learning and beating the fights the first time, and for high-end progression raiders, this typically means either partially or fully blind. The World Race champions progression raiders, and getting week 1 clears is a goal for many in the community. Burnout can come into play when those goals aren't reached, yet you feel like it is at no fault of your own. Maybe you've heard someone complain that they would have killed a fight by a certain day or week had it not be for some external factor, an inconsistent member of the team, internet or power problems, or a commitment level disconnect between players in the same static. Lack of control can be a major cause of burnout, and your inability to influence other players' consistency and mentality or the availability of their power and internet can wear you down over time, especially in contrast to your individual success and reliability in those areas. Dysfunctional team dynamics can also lead to burnout, as you are forced to spend energy not only on learning the fights themselves, but also on preventing arguments to keep the team together or hurt feelings when negativity spreads. Finally, extremes of activity can lead to burnout, and the need in Prague for constant energy and attention, or to be always on, was particularly highlighted in Dragonsong Reprise, the most recent ultimate fight, because of the consistency and precision it demanded. Parsing, another way to experience Final Fantasy XIV's endgame, is the attempt to maximize individual damage output in order to rank on FF logs, a third-party combat analysis and leaderboard website. Raiders can chase both historic parse colors, such as pink for a 99th percentile run, or the elusive gold for the 100th percentile, or compete in all-star rankings, in which they compete against everyone else on the same job across all fights within a specific patch cycle. Burnout factors into parsing again because of the elements outside of your control. Since crit has such an outsized influence on DPS, differences in crit RNG alone can make an imperfect run look epic, or a perfect run end up comically underwhelming. This lack of perceived fairness, not from person to person because we're all affected by this, but to you as an individual, directly leads to feelings of inadequate efficacy and can kill motivation, since perfect play no longer necessarily equates to ideal results. Other factors, such as having to have a team member sandbag or play inefficiently on purpose in order to hit specific kill times, like in P6S, or purposefully wiping on 50% of your runs in the P8S door boss in order to only use a superior fight timeline, are constant thieves of joy. It isn't enough to simply play well, which is disheartening and demotivational to many, and sandbag runs or resetting to get the correct fight timeline simply isn't very fun. Finally, speedrunning, the least talked about method of participating in Final Fantasy XIV Endgame, is maximizing team damage, sometimes even to the detriment of an individual's parse, while using quirks and game systems such as gear swaps to increase limit break generation, all in an effort to kill the boss as fast as possible. Speedrunning carries with it burnout risks as well. Instead of needing one person to have a great run, you now need all 8, all at the same time, and the only way to increase your odds are to run the fights as many as possible. This touches on 3 major causes of burnout all at the same time: the demand for constant energy and attention, similar to Prague, the need for extended focus in fights you've already defeated hundreds of times to the point where they're now monotonous, and game life imbalance due to the time commitment taking away from other things and people you enjoy. The effort you as a team put in is also much higher, spreadsheeting not only heal and mitigation plans, but also specific alternative rotations based on a calculated ideal kill time. So if that effort is not subsequently met with your desired results, the disappointment hits harder as a result. Finally, the ongoing debate about log dumping, or teams waiting until the day before a partition locks to upload their runs, adds to the feeling of inadequate efficacy. If you don't know the score or which team is secretly in the lead, or you don't know if you need to keep pushing for a few more seconds off your kill time, it can be difficult to hold on to the drive to compete purely in a void. So for me personally, the lack of a break from my static between Dragonsong Ultimate and the 6.2 Savage tier really lit the match for my own burnout in Final Fantasy XIV. DSR took longer than any of us expected, and by the time we were finished, instead of a break, it was time to start recruitment for Savage. 6.2 Savage was infamously tightly tuned, and although my team managed to beat the week 1 door boss DPS check multiple times, we were not able to get over the finish line by the end of the week, causing disappointment as well as team personnel adjustments. Finally, for me, this tier was particularly unfun to optimize, and although I had my best showing to date, it was difficult to celebrate the results when achieving them in the first place was unenjoyable. I found myself showing up to reclears on autopilot, lacking drive to get my final pink or push for a top 25 ranking, and also in a strange cycle of really wanting to play the game, but being cranky when it came time to actually log in to do so. I stopped streaming on Twitch, not feeling like I had the energy to entertain, and I stopped playing with non-static friends in between raid nights, not wanting to spend any more time in game. And that bummed me out. Final Fantasy XIV is my favorite game, and I've met so many great people in this community who I talk with daily. There's also an ultimate fight coming up next patch, so a lack of motivation really isn't an option for me. So how did I address this, and how can you combat your own burnout so you can get excited about 6.3 and be mentally ready for the next ultimate? Perhaps surprisingly, my solution was to be proactive. The first thing I did was evaluate my options. As of only 2 weeks ago, I was in 2 statics, about to start a 3rd, and playing 4 to 5 nights a week. I realized that the 2 main causes of my burnout were the amount of nights with scheduled raids and my increasing dissatisfaction with the current Savage tier. As a result, I decided to quit both Savage statics, disbanding my progression and reclear static and taking a sabbatical from my optimization team. I also decided that the answer wasn't really to quit the game for a period of time because I still very much wanted to play, so I challenged myself to do the Epic of Alexander on a different job and with different strats from when I originally progged the fight. It's easy to forget with scheduled static times and high demands of results that Final Fantasy XIV is a game, a leisure activity, a hobby, and one specifically designed by its creator with taking breaks in mind. It's a fine line between expectations and enjoyment, and although a specific level of performance is desired, a healthy balance between that and fun needs to be maintained maintained no matter what. For me, the mental stimulation and excitement from reprogging T has since helped battle away the monotony of this past Savage tier, and only raiding 1 to 2 nights per week now, with reduced hours at that, have opened up my evenings dramatically. And that's good, because a funny thing happened over the last month or so. I've absolutely fallen in love with YouTube. I've always maintained that it's incredibly important to have a thing outside of your main thing, and for me, although my primary way of engaging with Final Fantasy XIV is raiding, creating videos has now opened up a new level of engagement and creativity with the content at a level I never expected. Although I was exhausted from Final Fantasy raiding, I became completely re-energized by creating Final Fantasy videos. Learning new skills and diving into pursuits that really inspire you are fantastic ways to fight burnout, because the act of creation is efficacy in action. I took time to think and dream and plan, and within the next week, I'm going to announce 2 different series on this channel that I hope you will love as much as I do. The final thing I did is really take a moment to re-examine how I spend my time overall, which I think is important to take stock of every so often. Between working full-time, starting my own business in real life, and raiding 20 hours a week, I had been spending less time hanging out with my wife, working out, talking to friends, and on my other hobbies such as cooking. Creating on YouTube has actually re-inspired me to create in the kitchen as well, which has been terrific. I encourage you to make a point to round out your life from time to time, the metaphorical touch grass advice. Go to the gym, fix your sleep schedule, create something, make a new friend or reconnect to one you've lost touch with, travel, or do something spontaneous. None of that is meant to degrade or undermine the fun or importance of Final Fantasy XIV or gaming in general either. You simply realize that when Final Fantasy XIV, or any hobby for that matter, is an important part of your life as opposed to your entire life, the time you spend on it is all the more valuable as a result. So let me know in the comments if you're currently suffering from burnout in gaming or other parts of your life, or how you personally overcame that feeling. Also, please hit the subscribe button below so you'll be notified next time there's a new video. I wasn't kidding earlier either. Over the next month, I'm going to be releasing some things that I'm incredibly excited about that you won't want to miss. Take care.